It's amazing. Sometimes we just need that reminder. Oh, breathe. Oh, yeah, breathe. Thank you, Julie. It is good to breathe. You know, that's going to be the subject next week, actually, just breathing. Breathing. It's amazing what we can learn from breathing. Well, speaking of breathing, it's good to finally take some breaths in this sanctuary again. It's good to be back from being a long ways away. Australia it's a long ways from Omaha, I discovered. About 22 hours to get there, and spent the last 3 weeks covering most of that territory, which is about as big as the United States, actually. I think, you know, it's a huge, it's like it's a continent or something, you know. And in fact, you know, just, you know, it looks so small on paper, but then you start taking these flights everywhere and realizing, wow, the vastness of it all. It's only got about 20 million people, you know, compared to 300 million in our country, so there's a lot of empty space there too. I didn't see much empty space, though. I really went around and visited a lot of folks. It's amazing whenever you go out, you know, isn't it, how many good people in the world there are, and how many people are just doing things that never make the news. They're just quietly going about their everyday thing, and yet doing so many inspiring things. The last stop I made was in Adelaide, which is in the south, and those guys were probably one of the most amazing groups of people I met up with. Just everybody just quietly doing their thing, and yet the vision, the spiritedness was just so there. And one of those groups that I met up with said, please, would you come back and just greet the congregation for us and thank them for letting me go for a little while. And I said, well, you know, I got an iPhone. You can do that yourself if you'd like. They said, yeah, let's do it. So this is greetings from the Progressive Christian Network, some folks who showed up for a presentation on lightning in a dark wood in Adelaide. All right. Read. Yeah.
Good night, Countryside Community Church. We're traveling through the dark woods in Adelaide, South Australia. Hooray!
Also greeting you is someone many of you know, Rod Duncan and his wife Lynette. And next to her is their daughter Hannah. Spent a lot of good time with them in Melbourne, and they're very excited. They're going to be coming out here in May, so we will see them again. Also, the lorikeets that are all on their patio, they say, are also greeting you there. It's wild. The bird colors are just amazing there. Rod taught me something interesting about speaking Australian. He said, you know, the reason why they shorten all the words, it's because when they first settled, there were all these flies all over the place, and they just wanted to make sure the flies didn't get in the mouth. So they're saying, instead of good day, they're saying, good day. Good day. I don't know if that's true or not, but that's what Rod told me. So, got to eat. I'm not going to spend the whole sermon on my trip or anything, but I got to eat crocodile while I was there. Better to bite the crocodile than the crocodile bite you, I discovered. I also got to see some pretty interesting wildlife, including these things. Kangaroos literally hopping down the road. I even, pardon vegetarians, but I got to eat a kangaroo also. It does not taste like chicken. Crocodile tastes like chicken, but kangaroo kind of tastes like buffalo. So. And they want you to eat it. It's healthy, and it's overpopulated, and it's native. So anyway. That's all I'm going to say. If you want to read more about my trip, there's a little icon on the Countryside site that I just posted my last entry on Friday, and kind of gives a grand summary of my experiences there. But I really come back with having some great experiences, and also, you know, how when you step out of your own home context, you always learn more about your home context, you know, from being away too. It was really helpful to see, you know, what we're doing, why we're doing it, and help, you know, and it really was kind of undergirded and underscored just the importance and the joy of the work we're doing here, you know, without a lot of, you know, fanfare and everything. Just what we're doing is so important for keeping this wonderful faith and vital faith alive. Anyway, you can read about it more on the blog if you'd like. On to our series, the first part, listening to that still small voice and finding your own. Some of you have already discovered it. Some of you haven't noticed yet. Some of you are suspicious but not sure, wondering and maybe waiting for more evidence before you make up your mind. But we are not alone here. This place is not just earth and sky, plants and animals, and us humans. Funny things happen that add up to more than that. Every great religion has been formed and continued by those who have discovered it and wanted to know more. Most of the time, we stick to practicalities and try to survive, get good grades, get good jobs, establish homes, keep comfortable, keep safe, and help others out when there's enough left over. But that's not all that life is about. There's the spirit realm and spirit beings, and some say God. If so, that is the most exciting and then the most meaningful thing of all. If there is no contact with God, all religion is bunk. If there's no contact with God, this is all just a charade. If there is contact, it is the most important thing you will ever do. Some of you may find those words sound familiar. They're from Bruce Van Blair, who keeps leading our prayer retreats, and the one who really was responsible for me kind of developing my own prayer routines. I was actually learned prayer originally through yoga, so go to that yoga class. It was just a yoga piece on PBS when I was in high school, and just taught some basic breathing things and so forth, and it just blew open a whole universe. I was like, oh my God. I cannot believe, I had no idea that this realm, this way of, this life could be so huge. That's what started me, and then Bruce helped continue that path. So I've been really excited, to say the least, about this particular series, because it's had the prayer and meditation, which is the focus, had a huge effect on my own path, and I know it's had a huge effect on a number of yours as well. This series, we haven't been giving it much fanfare, but we actually are this series is connected to a few of the series prior to this, and it is connected to 8 more that will follow this under the general rubric, By This Way of Life. It's our way of really being intentional about saying, what really is the path of Jesus? I mean, for real, and can we kind of uncover its ancient roots and then trace it in such a way that we can actually find continuities and ways to experience that path in our world today, recognizing that oftentimes that path gets a bit obscured. I mean, there's a great historical and cultural difference between ourselves and this Jesus person who lived 2,000 years ago. So there's that divide that kind of obscures that path. There's also the agendas that are placed on Jesus' path by various interests. Either conservative Christianity or liberal Christianity all have their agendas that kind of get put on it, try to fit Jesus within it. That obscures the path. And then, of course, there's our own agendas, right? Our own ways we try to make Jesus fit into our life rather than us fit into that path and that life. And so it's helpful from time to time to really kind of say, wait a minute, let's just breathe and pay some deliberate attention. So this series has been connected to, for instance, we started in May with that series about the faith of Jesus in a pluralistic world. We continued it with kind of looking at Christianity in relation to other faiths. Then we continued that with that series, Hookers, Looters, and Cheats. If you've ever wondered if Jesus would want to spend time with you, just look at the curious companions he spent time with, and that should clear up any doubts. And then our last series, we just finished Failing, Falling, and Flying, noticing that, they talk about how we are marked by original sin. But the stories of Genesis keep showing that time and time again, but we're not defined by it. They keep showing that we're defined by original grace, not original sin. That the grace of God is just this hugely important piece that we integrate into our everyday path. And that grace is going to be underscored in this series mightily. Prayer is not the most easy thing. Connection with God is not the most easy thing. But happily, there is this thing called original grace. There is this definitional thing, this way that God comes to us that means in real terms that when we are intentional about connecting with God, that it's the intention that is more important actually than the technique or our ability to carry out that intention. There is this graceful thing that steps in where God actually starts doing the work, not just simply us doing the work. There's a great quote by Parker Palmer, one of my favorite authors, who says, the faith journey is less about making a big leap of faith than it is about putting one faithless foot in front of the other and doing it again and again. What happens as you walk that way is sometimes transformed by grace. I would say more than sometimes. When we get intentional, one faithless foot after another. It's not about getting every foot to fall right. It's about that intention, and we kind of have this wavering path, But you keep on being intentional, keep on trying to connect, and it will steer you overall in the right direction because there is grace in this world. Of course, when it comes to connecting, we have a history of being a bit shy about that connection. You're going all the way back to that great mythological story of the garden. I mean, as if to say, from the very beginning, God has offered us this path, and we kind of shy away. It kind of spooks us a bit. It comes from a direction that we can't predict, that we can't control, and we kind of like predictability and control. At least we say we do, until life gets predictable. Then we can't stand it, right? Really, we don't want predictability. What we want ultimately is trust. Trust in something that we can count on, that has some coherence, so some cohesiveness to our lives and can steer us in a better direction. But we're a bit shy. And when it comes to connecting with God, part of us worries too. What if we try to connect? What if we really kind of put ourselves out there in some significant way, really make an honest, intentional effort to connect with this God, and we don't get anything. There's no one on the other end of the phone. Part of us is secretly worried, so secret sometimes we can't even admit it to ourselves. We're not in our conscious awareness. We're secretly worried that maybe there is no one on the other end of that phone. I mean, the universe is a pretty vast place. What if we're all alone? Another part of us worries, well, maybe there is somebody on their end, but doesn't want to communicate, doesn't want to connect with us. What then? What if we put ourselves out there and that happens? But far more scary, though, than the prospect that there is no God, or God that would want to communicate with us, far more scary, at least in my experience, is that there is a God for real, and who really does want to communicate and really will communicate with us when we put it out there. I've been practicing a daily prayer regime for 33 years now. I shoot for at least a half an hour that I can get it, and then throughout the day, I have been intentional about trying to keep that connection open. So I've been doing this for a very, very long time, but to this moment, the hardest thing about prayer for me and connecting with God is just getting willing to have that connection. Doesn't that seem strange? Yeah, and I'm a minister, but when I compare notes with other people doing this a long time, they tell me the same thing. It's like, when the connection is made, it always hits me in ways that, or oftentimes hits me in ways that, again, I can't predict or control. And it tends to suggest a path for me, a turn, a change of direction. It's like, hey, have you been thinking about maybe it's not 180 degrees, but just taking a bit like this? And I'm thinking, oh, geez, why didn't I think of that? And it's not a matter of God suggesting a way that I really don't want to do. It's like when I get that connection, it's like, oh, that truly is a better way. But it doesn't always come on my timetable. You ever notice that? You put it out, God, I'd like, it to at least come as fast as McDonald's will give me that Happy Meal or whatever. It's like, come on, quick. I've got a trustees meeting tonight. I need some answers. They're going to want to know. Whatever it is. God doesn't always work on our timetable, and it doesn't always work in the way we want to connect. And it doesn't. God's voice doesn't come to us oftentimes through the people we want it to come through. It comes through people even who make us uncomfortable or annoy us or what have you. So it's a bit frightening, at times. And it's hard because God doesn't just flash a neon sign saying, here's my direction. It's like sometimes I get it wrong. Sometimes I actually go thinking, okay, this is the way now, and I realize, oh, that was a mistake. It's hard. But tell you the truth, I'm not complaining. I wouldn't have it any other way. I love this way that God works. I love the fact, actually, that it's hard, even though I don't like to admit that. I love it. Because if it wasn't hard, then it would just be a matter of God basically making me a robot. Go do this, go do that, and my will in this would be kind of left out of the picture. But because it's hard, then God is only really going to direct my life or help guide my life if I really want it, like really sincerely want it, not just kind of want it for a pious, well, I guess I'm supposed to, whatever. But really, like, I need this. I need this enough that I'm going to keep asking, and I'm going to keep searching. And so I have freedom. I have freedom to say yes or no in that, and that I'm glad. Because while I want God to guide my life, I also want that choice. I want to choose whether God will do that or not, and I'm going to try to choose more often yes than no. But the choice somehow God finds to be very important, and frankly, so do I. Perhaps so do you. Well, we are going to work at this, and kind of you're going to find maybe your experience will be a bit like Parker Palmer's. At least this has been my experience. He shocked me actually just recently. I was reading an article that he wrote a couple years ago in the Christian Century about just the craft of writing. And he said, if you've ever read a Parker Palmer book, it is like every word is just so perfect. It's like the right word. It's just amazing. You think, how can he do it? How can he be, does it just download for him or what? He actually said that he has yet to write a book that he hasn't written at least 7 drafts of the book. 7 drafts. Like, I thought I was bad. I'm on the 3rd draft of Lightning in a Dark Wood. And I'm like, God, can't you get it right? Come on. It's like 7. But that's like the prayer thing. That's like the connection thing. It's like we look for that connection. We get a sense for something, but then we kind of think, okay, well, was that quite it? Or not? And we keep revising until suddenly it just kind of there. Something just kind of clicks into place, and we think, okay, I'm going to go with that for the time being, and I'm going to walk in that direction, at least until I sense that I need to make a turn. That's the way it works. And we're going to experience this actually very directly. This series, the success or failure of it, actually depends far less on my ability to convey information as it is on you for this one, because it's not going to be a series about talking about prayer and connection. It's actually going to be about experiencing connection with the divine. And so every week, we're going to invite you to try something and to test it out during the week and come up with your own conclusions about this stuff. Don't take my word for it or somebody else's word for it, but actually try it for yourself and see. Maybe we're just full of it. It's always a possibility, believe me. That wasn't a big stretch of imagination, I know. But so this morning, what we're going to do is you've maybe found a yellow card, looks like this in your bulletin, and we're going to every week there's going to be a card that's like this, and we're going to invite you to take this card and use it in particular ways during the week. And if you didn't get one, we have enough for everybody. They'll be in the information table. But we're going to take our cue for this particular exercise that we're going to invite you into next week from the prophet Isaiah. Now, let me just state up front, you don't have to participate in this. Like, there's going to be no grades, and I'm not going to know, and nobody's going to know if you participate. So don't feel like you're being pressured or your arms are being twisted. Only do this if you feel like you might want to form your own opinions on this thing and try it. But you might find that if you do something, try these different angles at connection, that over a period of time, as you keep track of how the responses come, or if they come, that you can draw lines of continuity between those things. And you start to formulate it. It will actually, if your experience is like mine, keeping track of what really happens and what really doesn't happen, it starts to change your conception about how God even comes to us and how we experience God. It's a far more organic thing than just simply some person sitting up on high with a beard in the heavens and just kind of breaking into the natural order and saying, boom, here's the word. It's a very organic thing. We're going to try this for ourselves. We're going to take our cue this morning from Isaiah. Elijah, rather, sorry. Elijah, you may have heard his story before. We've covered it a couple of years ago in a particular way, but you may recall he lived in the 9th century in Israel. And at one point he gets like in major trouble with the king and queen. Most people forget the king. His name was Ahab. Most people remember the queen. Her name was Jezebel. Yeah, Jezebel. Yeah, this is that era, and he has really torqued them. Long story, but now he's on the run. Jezebel has vowed not to rest until she has killed Elijah, and so he goes tearing off into the wilderness, get lost out there, away from them. And she has already managed to kill a whole lot of the prophets and priests of Yahweh. She wants to rid the whole country of them. She's had enough. And so he's feeling really lost, really lonely, and scared. And so he goes down into the wilderness. And there it says he goes actually as far down to the wilderness as that old story goes about the Jews wandering in the wilderness. He goes to they call it Mount Horeb. In the Bible, they call it either Mount Horeb or they call it Mount Sinai. It's the place of the Ten Commandments. He actually goes and he goes clear down to that southern peninsula, and he finally finds Mount Horeb. And there it says, the English says he goes to a cave in order to meet God. The Hebrew says he goes to the cave to meet God. You think, why does it say he goes to the cave? It's because any good Hebrew worth their kosher salt would remember exactly, and when they say the cave, it's that one. They know there's a specific cave in Horeb that's very famous. It's the cave that Moses himself is said to have gone to in order to meet God. You may remember the story, Moses goes up to that mountain and God kind of keeps descending in this cloud and fire and smoke, and it's kind of weird, the story, but at some point Moses just kind of says, I need some more clarity. I want that neon flashing sign, God. I'm tired of this density and kind of searching in the darkness. And now, if you have a problem, by the way, if it poses an intellectual challenge about God descending and speaking out of a cloud and stuff, bear in mind that this is the mythological imagination that is trying to speak some very profound truths to us. It's not trying to talk about what happened 2,000 or 4,000 years ago. It's trying to tell us about what keeps happening time and time again in our lives. Okay? So they're trying to write large, in the concrete world, what happens in here every day, to us. So you pay attention to the story. Moses says, okay, I'm tired of it being so hard. I'm tired of making those revisions, in trying to get it right. Just speak to me clearly. I want to meet with you face to face. So God says, that's kind of problematic. He goes, yeah, but help me out here. Go with me. Well, God says, actually, it would kill you if you saw me face to face. It's too much for your imagination. So I can't do that, but I tell you what. I will come down and I will put my hand over your face, and then I'll walk by you. And as I walk by, I will take my hand up, and then you'll see me. And so, as the story goes, that's exactly what happens. He's out there at the cave, and God puts God's hands over. Again, this is mythological imagination. This is trying to describe what happens to us, not simply what happened to him. So, can't see, and then suddenly, I want clarity, and then God puts the hand up, and what does Moses see? He sees God's, in the English it says backside, his back. In the Hebrew, it says he saw God's backs. It's a plural dual form of the Hebrew word, which means two things of equal proportion. What does he see when God passes by and lifts his hand? Yeah, the Renaissance artists knew. Yeah, It's basic. The humor underneath the Hebrew is almost always lost in the English, but they are such a humorous people. It's like God is saying, you want clarity? Well, we have expressions for that, don't we? Yeah. I mean, literally, it's like, don't expect this all to be clear, I value your free will. So it's not going to be free. You're going to want this. It's not ever going to be clear like that. Let's hear now the story of Elijah at this odd little cave.
At that place he came to a cave and spent the night there. Then the word of the Lord came to him, saying, "What are you doing here, Elijah?" He answered, "I have been very zealous for the Lord, the God of hosts, for the Israelites have forsaken your covenant, thrown down your altars, and killed your prophets with the sword. I alone am left, and they are seeking my life to take it away." He said, "Go out and stand on the mountain before the Lord, for the Lord is about to pass by." There was a great wind, so strong that it was splitting mountains and breaking rocks in pieces before the Lord. But the Lord was not in the wind. And after the wind, an earthquake. But the Lord was not in the earthquake. And after the earthquake, a fire. But the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire, the sound of sheer silence. When Elijah heard it, he wrapped his face in his mantle and went out and stood at the entrance of the cave. Then there came a voice to him that said, "What are you doing here, Elijah?" He answered, "I have been very zealous for the Lord and the God of hosts, for the Israelites have forsaken your covenant, thrown down your altars, killed your prophets with the sword. I alone am left, and they are seeking my life to take it away." Then the Lord said to him, "Go, return on your way to the wilderness of Damascus. When you arrive, you shall anoint Hazael as king over Aram. Also you shall anoint Jehu son of Nimshi as king over Israel. And you shall anoint Elisha son of Shaphat as Abel-Meholah as prophet in your place."
Once again, if you have trouble imagining wind, fire, earthquakes, and all these things, you bear in mind it's trying to talk about in here, not simply out there. Every single detail of the story is meant to tell us something about our lived experience, our concrete experience of the divine. So it pays not to simply rush past it. For instance, did it strike you as odd that God has to ask Elijah twice why he's there? I mean, as if it isn't obvious anyway. And second of all, twice? I mean, does God have this terrible memory problem or what? I forgot. Why is it you're here again? The story isn't trying to tell us that God had amnesia, or it's trying to tell us about the way we approach the divine. It's trying to tell us, it's suggesting most likely, if you're going to try to connect with God, be clear about what you're trying to do. Here, what's your objective here? What's the specific question that's on your mind? What's the need? It's not that that's required. It's not like that God will not connect with us unless we just have this purpose, agenda, or something like that. But sometimes it's actually very helpful. In fact, often it's very helpful when we try to intentionally connect with God to have a question that's important to us or a need that's important to us. And we put it out there. I need this. I need an answer, about this. So make sure it's specific, and that it affects you, not some big kind of abstract question like, why were we created, or why is there evil in the world, something like that. If you're going to ask, why is there evil in the world, they still haven't found an answer to that, right? I mean, that's going to be a hard one. It's probably a big for us to comprehend. But what do I need to do in my relationship right now with my spouse? Or what kind of changes do I need to make to my job patterns that I keep on getting, I'm going crazy here and I can't quite figure that out? Things like that. Good stuff. Why are you here? No, really, why are you here? That's what the story's trying to say. So then he got it clarified. Then it says, there's this wind, and then there's the earthquake, and then there's this fire, and it says God was not in any one of these. Again, that's not just simply this kind of interesting pyrotechnics going on. This is the story trying to tell us something. Those three things, wind, earthquake, fire, are three of the primary metaphors for God's voice in the Old Testament. So even Jesus draws on that. I mean, what's the Holy Spirit like? He says what? It's like the wind. You hear the sound of it, and you don't know where it's coming from or where it's going. It's like that. It's like that. So what the story is suggesting is that the word of the Lord comes to Elijah, but not in the ways that he was expecting. Like, okay, I think I got this figured out. God came to me like in this direction last time, so now I'm ready. Boom. So oftentimes that's what's going to happen to us, is that when we try to go straight forward, okay, I'm going to have a God experience now. God is going to talk to me because God talked to me when I was in this place, feeling this way last time. It's the surest way to make sure that you will not hear anything. It tends to come to us slantwise, when we're just kind of out of the corner of our eye, that kind of thing. We can't make God happen. So it's not in there, and then it does happen. It happens in a way he didn't expect. It happens, the English says the voice came in a still, small voice. Some translations, it's in the sound of sheer silence. The Hebrew there is actually untranslatable. Well, you can translate it, but it doesn't make sense. It says he heard God's voice in the sound of finely powdered silence. Finely powdered silence. What does that mean? A couple years ago, I suggested mentioned this very story, and Walter Brueggemann, the Old Testament scholar, has this brilliant analogy, I think, that really gets it right. He said it's like the sound of freshly falling snow. You know how that goes? You can't hear snow falls, but you can tell snow falls even if you couldn't see it, because it changes the acoustics of everything around it just slightly. The story is trying to tell us that oftentimes when that word of God comes to us, it's not through flashing signs and neon, whatever, or bombastics. It's through those subtle changes that just simply shifts our perception just slightly to the point where just everything changes, just subtly, And oftentimes that's the thing. The spiritual life isn't about saying, we're headed this direction, and God says, oh, you know what? You need to go 180 degrees away from where you're going. Oftentimes, it's actually just saying, adjust it by a millimeter. Just a millimeter. And it opens up a whole other perspective. Like a photographer, the difference between a good photographer and a great one, sometimes it's just a millimeter of an angle. It's like, there it is. I didn't see it coming. So that's what he does. And then he gets this, this message in it. Even though it's silent, he gets these marching orders. You go and anoint these two guys as king over Judah and of Israel. And that's oftentimes what happens, is that we experience God, and it's not just simply for our private kind of like, oh, that's cool. It's like, actually, now go and do something. Not always, but he usually offers us something that's high enough that like we want to go and follow that in some way. Elijah is going to go anoint these two kings. In other words, he's going to do something that he probably does not feel qualified to do, and it's something that's dangerous, because not everybody would want him to anoint these two particular people as king and queen. Remember, in fact, in Israel, they already had this king and queen, Ahab and Jezebel, right? So it would be actually far more dangerous for him to go out and do this. And God's saying, hey, it's okay. He likely would have been a bit stressed about this, and yet he goes and does it. Why? Because he knows in the story he's trying to suggest that when God sends us to do something, or moves us to act in a certain way, God is not expecting that we'll do this alone. God doesn't expect that, go do this now, let me know how it goes. God is expecting to be there with us every step of the way. So if we keep clearing it up, we keep opening ourselves, we find that way to do what we seem to be completely unqualified to do, or impossible to do, or even dangerous to do at times. But it's that peace and joy that keeps saying, okay, go. This is the way. Most of us get those senses, and most of us are terrified to follow what actually makes us joyful and peaceful. That's the way it comes. So, exercise. If you want to try this out for yourself, first thing to do is find your cave. Find a place that you can just kind of extract yourself from the fray for just a little bit. Not hours and hours. This is not going to take 12 hours of your day every day. This is actually this is an easy one, but it's easy as hard. Okay? Find a place where you can get away. Maybe it's your den, or it's a breakfast table before everybody gets up. Maybe it's a walking path. Maybe it's when you're out biking. But make sure that you can actually clear your mind and get intentional about something. Find that place where you're going to intentionally try to connect with God. Not that God's going to come to you as soon as you find that place. That's not it at all. But you're going to put it out there to God. You're going to see does this actually work? I'm going to put something out there. I'm going to take my card, and I'm going to then, after I found my cave, I'm going to then find that question or need that I have that's highly specific to me, that I actually care about. I care about enough that I'm not going to forget that question. I suggest you write it down, because oftentimes what I do is I have this need, I come to God in prayer, and then if I don't write it down, actually a response comes and I completely forget about it, because once the response comes, I'm on to the next thing. But it's really helpful. You write this down and you realize, oh my gosh, I had a response to this. So find your question. Make sure it's not too big. A question like, why is there life, or anything like that. There's that story about George Washington Carver. He goes, Mr. Creator, why did you make the universe? And response, little man, that question is much too big for you. You can try another. So he says, well, okay, Mr. Creator, why did you make the human race? Little man, that question is still too big for you. Try another. So then he says, okay, well, Mr. Creator, why did you make the peanut? Little man, that question is just your size. You listen and I will teach you. Find a question that's just your size. Listen, and maybe you'll find 300 different ways of making peanuts. This stuff with peanuts are like what George Washington Carver did, but really you'll find a variety of things that come through just finding that right question. And then finally, the third thing, and this is the hard part, and this is where it may not take time. Maybe this will take just a short amount of time, or it might take hours, depending. But actually get willing. Actually say, okay, here's my question, here's my need. Now I'm seriously willing to listen. And don't just make that a head thing. Feel it in your gut. I'm willing to listen. If you make it clear, or clear enough, I'm willing to listen to whatever form you'll come, whatever the answer is, I will follow to the best of my ability. That kind of willingness. If you will do that, that's the most important thing of all. And you may get it wrong. You may have to make those revisions. You may have to kind of test and see. But if you'll just put one foot in front of the other throughout the week, listen during the day. Pay attention to the music you hear, the conversations you have, those inner thoughts that run through your head during the day. Pay attention for what just simply comes and just subtly clicks. One step after another, one unfaithful foot right in front of the other, we find that grace works. Write it down, pay attention, and we'll compare notes next week. And by the way, it may not come by next week, or the answer may come before you've even got halfway through the sentence as you write it down. It's God's timetable, not ours.